everyone, and welcome to our discussion about the recruiting dilemma. Welcome Bobby, Karina, Jennifer, Juden, Karen, feel free. Hey, Asheville, North Carolina. Hope the weather's doing nice there. We got some rain here in Western New York. Let's see who else we have here. We've got Kim, Lynn, Marnie, Nancy, welcome. We got a couple Rebeccas joining us. We'd love to know where you guys are from. Sunny and hot Florida, beautiful. Love to hear that. Great. Well, today, again, like I said, thank you for joining us. Texas, my sister lives there. We've got some great things going on today on our webinar, and it's going to be hosted by our founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360, Tony D'Agostino. Hello from Duluth, Minnesota. No snow yet. Yeah, we're saying the same thing here. We've got some great featured guests today. We've got Mona Jackson, CEO of Kids of Valor Academy. We also have Jesse Bean, who will be joining us. He's an owner of Growing Hearts and Minds, as well as Kishia Saffold, the owner of Kiddie Care Learning Center. These are all owners. They all sit in your shoes. Hello from Reno, Nevada. Good to see you. I'm glad that you guys are all joining us today. And this is a definite dilemma that we're all going through. And we definitely encourage you to add in the Q&A section any questions that you have throughout the webinar, and we will be more than happy to try to get to them all and answer them at the end of the webinar. You can also chat, and we will try to get back to you through that, but definitely through the Q&A, we'll be able to respond to most of your questions. And it doesn't just have to be to our host, Tony. It can also be to some of our guest speakers as well. Feel free. And see, who else do we have that joined us? Hello, Pam. Looks like we've got Sharon, Susan, another Susan. Good afternoon, Terry. Good afternoon, Tony. Welcome all. If you guys are interested in credits, we are going to, for the CEU credits, there will be a link provided to you shortly where you can request to have a certificate. I will be repeating that, and we just had that pop up on the chat screen for you guys. So definitely feel free to copy and paste that and send us your information so we can get you guys some credits for our webinar for the hours. Good afternoon, Lynn and Kim and Karen. Let's see who else has joined us here. You got Karina and Claire. Let's see, Francis, Jacqueline, welcome. And we love to know where you guys are all from. So keep popping in the chat area. And we encourage questions, so don't hesitate to enter any questions. And like I had mentioned, oh, Ontario, Canada, right across the Great Lake Ontario from me. Welcome. We do recommend, if you do have questions, definitely put it in the Q&A. So if we cannot get it today, hopefully we'll be able to get that to you guys later on. We will have something available for you guys that will email out as a follow-up. Ottawa, Illinois, welcome. Long Island, New York. And we got, I'm going to butcher this, Tucaraca, Texas. Hello from Virginia Beach. Jeffersonville, Pennsylvania, welcome. Wonderful. Hope you guys are all having a good Tuesday out there. And everyone had a good Halloween. Sure you guys had some fun costumes with your kids that came through. Richmond, Virginia, welcome. Wisconsin. We've got people from all over the place. This is great. I didn't mention, my name is Nicole Farkas, and oh, there I am. And I am a member advocate here at Inspire Care 360, and I will also be your MC for today. Welcome from Michigan. My family's from Michigan. Go Blue. Sorry if you're a Spartan. Feel free to email me. My email is here, Nicole Farkas at inspirecare360.com. If you have any information that you would like to get from me in regard to either the seminar or from Inspire Care in general, hello, Luann from Pennsylvania. And here is the link. We will probably be posting this again so you can get your certificate. That way you receive accreditation for the hour that you are spending with us today, which we are very happy to have you on board. And very shortly, thank you, Sarah. As you can see, Sarah just did copy the link so that you can just simply fill that link out. And we will then be able to send you your certificate for the hours. So today, our agenda, Tony will be here with us. Tony Agostino, as I mentioned, he is the CEO and founder of Inspire Care 360. So we're going to go through he's going to go through welcoming. We're going to go through a little housekeeping and review of the challenge that we all struggle with out there today. And I say we because Tony actually does own, and we own, Inspire does own 3 centers here in Western New York as well. We're going to go through some panelist interviews, which we're really excited about. And at the end, as I mentioned, if we have time, we'll do a Q&A with you. But please, in the meantime, do not hesitate to put them in the Q&A spot at the bottom of your screen. And we will make sure that we try to get to everybody at the end of the day. And here is Tony, our fearless leader here at Inspire Care 360. And he is, like I'd mentioned, he does own and operate 3 ECE schools here in Western New York, and 30 years of experience with talent, people, and learning. And I can say from experience, he knows his stuff. He's great to work with, a great boss. And he founded Inspire Care 360.
Now
so
I'm gonna have
Tony,
to cut you off, Nicole.
I'm gonna throw it over to you.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thanks for welcoming everybody here, and thank you, Nicole. We're going to go ahead and get started. So with that said, everybody, welcome very much to our presentation today. You know, just jumping here back to the very beginning, the recruiting dilemma, unique ways to solve the recruiting and retention challenges. You know, I don't think there's probably been anything more challenging since we were going into the pandemic and then coming out of the pandemic has been around staffing. We've recently done a number of presentations on turnover and how to reduce turnover, but I really think that there's a huge conundrum around the idea of recruiting and how to properly recruit. So as we get into some housekeeping things first, before we get into our panelist discussions, let's talk a little bit about some different solutions out there. And these are some solutions that IC360 brings, but this is sort of just to, you know, let you folks know about them and identify with them. If you've been on any of our webinars before, you've probably now have heard about IC360 Healthy Advantage. This is a solution that was developed directly for the idea of how do you better recruit and how do you retain staff. And that really is, as you see the stat up here, 49%, almost half of your employees look for a new job in the next 10 months, or excuse me, next year, you know, based on dissatisfaction with benefits, particularly healthcare benefits. It is one of the very best ways to have a solution, but oftentimes the challenge with healthcare is it's so expensive. The premiums are so expensive, then high deductible plans. So what we did is we looked at defining what I call the deconstructed major medical plan. So in other words, you don't have everything under the sun that a major medical plan has, but then again, you also don't have the price. What you do have is a highly flexible and affordable plan here that you can roll out to your teammates. You can have for yourself, your administrative team, and it pays from $1. It is a qualified plan that works with, you know, the Affordable Care Act. So if you have more than 50 FTEs, it meets those requirements. So you're not penalized for the Affordable Care Act, you know, issues. It covers things such as office visits, $15. It covers like specialist visits, $15, urgent care visits at $50, lab work, what have you. There's a number of different programs that people can choose from, but it doesn't affect the program from the premium price for the owner. It is very cost effective for the owner operators of the schools, where it's only $50 per person up to the first 10 people, and then it drops down to $25 per person. So it is a wonderful program that we've had just a ton of people in the industry take advantage of. And if it's something that you're more than interested, Sarah, if you could put a link out there for everybody to learn more about Healthy Advantage, she'll be getting a link out there in our Q&A. And if you want to learn more about it, reach out to Nicole, or reach back to Sarah or say, hey, I'm just interested. Could you reach out and talk to me about that? The other thing that we wanted to talk about too is Inspire University. So Inspire University is the Inspire Care 360 platform. It's a large part of what we offer. We offer both our platform as well as different services. But within Inspire University, it is something that allows you to have, and we offer as part of it, your handbooks as well as family handbooks, not only staff, but family handbooks that get personalized for you, up to date with state, federal regulations, but all of the things that are important to you in your schools. You have an orientation that is personalized, including videos from you and the like. Operational procedures. I'll tell you, it's one of the things that have been a real challenge for many people is to get those operational procedures out there, how to change a baby, how to clean a changing table, how to conduct circle time, how to open up the school in the morning or your program, close it down, conduct fire drills, all those different elements. All part of this is part of the program. Mentoring development, really critical, because a lot of times we just have people who've been there a while, but they don't really understand what mentoring is. And so we help develop mentors, as well as help for new staff to be a mentee and someone who can come in and be coached. And there's a bunch of professional development that's really focused on how your staff become good professionals within the child care space. So that's not training on how to teach kids as much as it is about communication, how to work with parents, how to best work with administration, how to conduct yourself during a tour, how to make sure the school screams wonderful things about why it should be a great place for children to go to through the marketing. And so this is all about your people learning all and becoming on the same page. And then peak performance, which is going to be rolled out at the beginning of the year. And that's really a total rewards solution that really talks about how you can set and forget a performance management, all tied into a platform that allows people to conduct themselves, do the activities, go through the training, and then earn their way to the next level within your organization. So it's a way to really establish those who follow your vision and your culture to really get to the next level within your organization, create a full career path. You can also develop and deliver all of your own content. We have an content building solution, so you can build your own e-learning in here and distribute it all, as well as any videos or PowerPoints or PDF files, anything of that nature that you want to distribute to not only your staff, but your family altogether. Any different types of forms and documents that you want to get out to your families too. And then there's a survey engine. So that's all part of Inspire University. And the reason we talked about Healthy Advantage and Inspire University is we are huge believers that not only do you need benefits, but you do need to try to get everybody on board when you're trying to recruit and retain people. And we think these are two very key elements. But with that said, let's move to one more element before we get going, and that is a new ebook that we just released. This is building a total rewards relationship with your childcare team. This is a completely free ebook. I believe Sarah will be putting a link into the chat. This is learning about 6 key components in this ebook about how to build long-term relationships with staff to reduce your turnover and to increase your retention. It's really about the fact of let's get out of this model of it's just having to pay more all the time. There's many other elements beyond wages as to what gets the hearts and the minds of your staff on board with you and keeps them on board. And that's what we address in this ebook. So please feel free to download it, share it, what have you. So you can recognize here why staff leave and turnover, learn about the mix beyond wages and what are the things that you need to do, as well as look at evolving your team's roles to create true career opportunities so people don't feel like they're only a teacher or they're only a director is the highest levels, but there's other levels they can have within the organization. So they have a truly satisfying career within your organization. There's a bunch more in there too. And then let's jump into the topic today. So top recruiting challenges for ECE. This has come from a number of you this has come from our own experiences with our own school, but I think most of these things will resonate. I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat too of what else you have, but typically what we have is quality of life versus bricks and mortar. One of the things that happened with the pandemic, which, there were some silver linings that came out, but there are also some negative things that came out. One thing that really hit us hard in the childcare spaces, when a lot of people didn't have to come to work anymore, they started really enjoying being and working out of their home, which made a large shift for a lot of people who typically worked within our field to decide they did not want to work in a bricks and mortar building anymore. They wanted to work out of their home, work off their PC, not be in a situation where they had to come in every day. That dramatically decreased the number of people in the marketplace for us to hire and recruit as assistant teachers, cooks, bus drivers, any administrative staff. So that made things very challenging for us. Lack of experienced talent too. We've noticed more and more there's people who are coming to us that are rather young, who have had very little experience, very little in the childcare field. And if they haven't had really very strong grooming in the field. So we have had to do a lot to do some education to get them up to speed, not only in the specifics to meet the requirements of our licensing, to meet the process and procedures of our schools, but also just to really be part of our culture and issues, wage alignment for roles too. And what we mean by that is wages have been going crazy. They've been sort of jumping through the roof in some states, especially because the states are requiring increases, with minimum wages always have been going up, as well as salaries. And there's some other states too that have not had the increases in minimum wages, but they're still getting the cost pressures because of what's going on across the board with there not being enough talent. So we oftentimes find ourselves where we're raising our wages, which it seems like it's going much faster, in addition to what's going on with inflation, than what our margins can provide. And then there's a true war on talent. And what we mean by that is there tends to be more jobs right now still than seekers. They said during these times of inflation that, there'll be a lot more job seekers out there and, people won't be hiring. But I know in our industry, we are still desperately looking for good talent. Yes, we have some people who are walking in the door, but having the right kind of fit is critical for us. We also have something that's sort of interesting that has become more of a cultural thing that we are seeing. And there's a lot of apathy from candidates, lack of being prepared for an interview. For instance, even when they come in and respond to a job posting that you have, they almost don't even remember your company's name when they arrive for the interview. They're not exactly sure why they applied or what exactly you were looking for. They really didn't do some research oftentimes about who you are, where you're located, what's important to you. These are things that candidates used to do a few years ago. We're very prepared, but now we're finding a lot of candidates aren't even prepared to come in, and they oftentimes don't really look at the kind of impression they're trying to make. Quite often, when they're applying for a role, they aren't specific to your company. They're just doing a broadcast, of all that. Here's my resume. I'm out there in the marketplace, and the first one to grab me might get my attention or pay me the most. So there is a little bit of apathy coming from the candidates we have. There's also something that I've seen is very unique that's been out there, and that has been people have come, accepted a job or been offered a job because they went through the interviewing, they spent time in a classroom, they filled out all the paperwork got submitted to the state, they get a job acceptance, great, come on in Monday comes and they don't show. They're like, what the heck happened? Where did they go? Why would you spend all that time and invest all that time not to show? And then you try to reach out to them and there's no response. So that has become a bit of a conundrum too, as to why it is so difficult to get people on board and really to engage them up front. And some of them have been leaving as quickly as they joined because they have put out so many different resumes out there that while they're accepting your job, they're still considering other jobs in the background. So it is a real critical issue of if you don't get them engaged very quick into your culture, they will leave out the back door as quick as they came in the front door. And then media, on top of it all, we have the extra pressure that the media has almost been promoting over the past year and a half. It started last summer in 2021 about promoting the great resignation. And it's the time for people to really consider leaving their current organization and moving on. And I don't see any great value in why this has been occurring, but it has been occurring, and the media has been a promoter of it. And it's one of those challenges, again, that we have to deal with. It's one of those, I guess you would call a threat that we see happen in our industry, where it's a little bit of putting a pressure on the owners and operators of the school to have to become that much more creative. And hence why we're doing our presentation today. So I'd like you to meet our panelists, and I'm going to go through a review of them, and then I'll bring our first one on after that. But we have Mona Jackson. Very happy to have Mona, who's the CEO of Kids of Valor Academy, and we'll talk about her in just a couple moments. We also have Jesse Bean, owner of Growing Hearts and Minds. Fortunately, we had our Spark 2022 conference canceled because of Hurricane Ian, but Jesse was actually going to also attend there and being our MC for that event. So we're going to catch him next time on that, but he also has some really interesting things to talk about today. And then we have Kishia Saffold, and owner of the Kiddie Care Learning Academy. I'm very excited to have her on here also. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and let's bring Mona on board. So Mona, if you want to pop on board, welcome. How are you? And I have you on mute. So if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, how are you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great. We're very happy to have you. You know, it's one of these topics that when we put out a request, a number of these people who are out there saw our request go out, and you did respond. When you saw the request for this, Mona, what was it that sort of went through your head, and why did you think, hey, you know what, I think I might have a few things to offer? What are some of the challenges you've been dealing with?
Definitely everything that you listed previously, I've experienced at our schools. And I think what drawn me to that is, I think Iron Sharpens Iron. I've been in the industry for 28 years. And I feel like as much knowledge as we can share information and support one another through this tough season of hiring quality staff. And so I was also interested to see what other people have experienced out there, because sometimes you feel like you're on the island and your organization is the only one going through this. And so I just wanted to make sure that I can give my viewpoint and also learn from others on this platform.
Yeah. And I appreciate all that. So how has it been, talk just a little bit about your schools. How many do you have? I know it says a few up here, but tell us a little bit about what you have there today and how many staff.
So I'm in Houston, Texas. We have 3 centers right now. We have 32 that we have on staff. We're working on our 4th location currently. And I think we had a lot of trouble with staffing right before the pandemic. So once the pandemic hit, it really didn't help. And one of the things that we had to do is look at ourselves internally. Okay, what can we do? Who do we have applying? Why are they applying? Why are people leaving? What our retention rate was, and really look at that and try to create an environment where our staff wants to stay, and also that we can recruit quality team members. And if not, we can kind of grow our own as well.
Okay, and so do you have a bit of a philosophy about recruiting?
That we're always hiring. I think sometimes we'll get close to they'll say, oh, we're fully staffed, or we're close to being fully staffed, or we only need this. And sometimes just having a conversation, having a pipeline of candidates is important. And also for your current team to see that you're actively recruiting, and that you're actively recruiting, because also lets them know that there's people that actually want to work here and are interested in coming. So that makes them value their job a little bit more. And also it lets the team know if there is a hole that we're actively recruiting to get someone in there to help them out, that they're not going to be working overtime or these long hours, or we're having to turn away different customers because we can't maintain our state ratios.
Yeah. And so when you were before just before the pandemic as to coming into the pandemic, have you evolved the way that you've recruited to deal with the situation, or have you always done the same thing of just recruited a lot?
We've evolved a lot. I mean, we want to look at the retention and talk to our staff. What can we do better? Is it, benefits? Is it the hours? Also, I think one of the things that we hadn't looked at one of our locations, we're getting a lot of turnover, and some of the children there, we were getting a lot of behavioral issues and different things like that where the teachers didn't feel supported. So also just being able to get a feedback as to, okay, what are some things that we need to fix so that when we do get quality candidates, like you said, it's not they start and then it's flight. They're there one day and they're gone the next. Our staff's somewhat loyal. They have some attachment to the children. So a lot of these things they're going to kind of navigate with us. Someone new coming on board, and you have a teacher like, oh, good luck, this child slaps you here, this one hits you here, or you never get off work on time. That's going to drive some of those candidates away. So we had to make sure that some of these openings weren't self-inflicted wounds. And so we want to make sure that we have a good quality environment to where that when we do have candidates come on board, that what we sell them in the interview is actually what they experience in the classroom. And that comes with training as well.
Yeah, so let's dig a little deeper into what you're saying. I think you hit on something that's really important. I've had it happen in one of my schools too, but I would love to hear about it, especially when you have either behavioral issues going on with children that affect your staff, or even issues like with parents and the pressures that they can bring to the staff. How have you looked to evolve your thinking and protecting your staff and making sure your staff were in a good situation so they didn't feel threatened when they actually came in to do their job?
Definitely just have an open door philosophy that you can come in and say, I'm having struggles with this child and there's viable solutions, not, okay, well, it's going to be okay, or they're having a bad day, or how Jonathan is, kind of deal with it. Okay, where are you struggling? What training can I get you? If there's a parent being a bully and being negative, addressing the parent. We've actually disenrolled parents that are being bullied, that we cannot meet their need every day. There's some type of conflict, or they're extremely aggressive to our staff. And a lot of the staff would, say, I'm putting in all I can, loving their child, and yet I get no kudos. I get, it's a thankless job. And I wanted to turn that around. And so also changing the parents' thought process. And I think for us, the beauty of COVID is a lot of them had to spend time with their children, and they realized it's not as easy as they thought. So one of the things that we have gained post-COVID is the respect factor that I don't feel like happened in the early childhood field before that. They definitely value what we bring to the table. They understand how hard the job is. And so that's helped in some regards. But we had started to address that situation before COVID in order to keep our staff. And that's how we're able to keep them through COVID as well.
That's really good. That's very powerful information. We have one of our guests on here who asked, I have a child who's crying nonstop, constantly 4 to 5 hours a day. And it sounds like she's a little bit at wit's end. She's like, what should I do? What are your thoughts if you have a situation like that where it's exhaustive to the teacher? You have a behavioral issue that keeps on going. And you're not gonna, everybody's different, right? So
Yeah,
you can't solve it immediately with, here's your Band-Aid. But what is your approach that goes through your mind, Mona?
there's several things. I'll go in and observe the classroom and try to be a helpful hand, especially my management team. So if a staff I've been in this for 28 years, a child's crying, hey, deal with it. They're going to get adjusted. They're going to get over it. Some kids, they take a lot more time. So I'm going to go and observe and make sure it's a good situation. Maybe the child needs a smaller group size. Maybe that room is not a good fit. Sometimes talking to the parents and saying, hey, we want to make sure that this is a great experience for everyone. This 8 hours is a lot for Johnny. How about we start off slow and let's do like half days, or, part-time days, or a couple hours, and see how he adjusts. And I'm not afraid to have a conversation that this is not the right environment. Your child really needs one-on-one care. Maybe they need like a nanny situation or an in-home, some other situation, or, even a childcare center that maybe have smaller group size. We have 30 in this class, whatever it can be, come up with some solutions. But I've learned that sometimes if I try to make a circle into a square, I'm going to lose staff and I'm going to lose other kids. And also we have a tour come in and there's a child screaming and they have to change other kids. They can't give them that one-on-one time. And it looks like, oh my God, this poor baby's being neglected. When the reality is we've tried everything, and there's still other kids that we have to care for. And so I have to look at it overall in the 360-degree perspective and decide, is this the right fit moving forward? And some kids, we've told their parents and they've came back in 6 months and it's a fit. And sometimes we can get them adjusted in a couple months, but I'm not afraid to tell the parents that, hey, we need your help with this, call or whatever. And it's a team effort. And if we decide that they need to go, we make that relatively fast and not just think of dollar signs or we have to fill our classrooms. And I think teachers, that resonates with them. They love us for that. And then that's why they end up staying at my schools.
Yeah, and I think that's really powerful. We've experienced something similar too with my schools, where if your teachers feel secure that you are advocating for them in addition to the families, you're not just trying to fill the classroom, you're not just trying to satisfy the parent, but you're really trying to be like protective and supportive of your staff. I think it's huge. Also, the other thing too, which you mentioned, I think is really powerful, Mona, is bringing in the parents early. You know, there's been a little bit of things that I think we've all seen where parents have this idea that behavioral issues that are at home, they're somehow going to get fixed at school and we're going to fix it for them. And as we all know, it's a complete team effort that we have to handle things during the day, but they have to carry on things throughout the evening and the mornings and what have you. So I think you're exactly right, because you have to be on board early. You do need to document things and what have you. But I think being able to team with your staff members, the counter side of that too is sometimes what happens, and you have to be cautious with staff, is once they feel like you're advocating for them, sometimes they also want to dump every single problem back on the director or the administrator's hand and say, it's not my problem. How do you deal with that?
Definitely, it's training. So, I mean, I definitely we try to do one-on-ones and we try to do monthly trainings and we let them know. One of my philosophies and what I've always said is, you know, the teachers, you can teach that child that comes in and it's the easiest. But what makes you a teacher and an educator is that one that you can teach that's a polar opposite in. And so we don't want to give up on children. So if there's strategies that I can give them, if I can have them shadow another teacher, or I can help them through the process, or even go in and teach by direction. So just by me organically being there, giving some suggestions and showing them how I can have classroom management. So we spend a lot of time on classroom management. We spend a lot of time on, you know, different personality centers. How's the class set up? Are we keeping the kids engaged in creative activities? How are you prepared as the teacher when you come in? Do you have a plan for the day? Are you following the lesson plans, or is it a free fall? So some of those things that, you know your teachers well enough, and that's important as leaders, that we spend time in the classrooms, that we're walking the school where they're not just in their office. And so you can see that there's strengths and weaknesses of every teacher. And then it's our job to develop them in those areas that they're weak. And so I'm not afraid to, when I'm around and I'm in your classroom and I'm talking to you, this is training. And I'm always observing on ways that I can say, hey, kudos, great job, you did that well. Hey, you know, I think you need to ask more open-ended questions. I think he's jumping off the wall because of X, Y, and Z. It's too much of a transition time between the next activity. And so we're constantly giving feedback, whether it be positive or some opportunities to improve. And that way, they know that you genuinely care, and you're not going to let them just get away with things by complaining or trying that you don't like so-and-so and you want them out of your classroom. I said, as soon as we get Johnny out of here, I can guarantee you another Johnny's going to come even worse. And you would wish that you would learn how to deal with Johnny, so that you're in a position to where this next child comes, oh, he's like Johnny, and you have some skill set and some strategies to deal with Johnny, so that you know, we're not just constantly feeling like we have to move children out of our class. We have to find ways in order to meet every child and their need individually. They're not all going to be the same. And once they get that concept and the light bulb goes on and they actually win with Johnny, they'll come and high five me, Miss Mona, you're so right. Oh my gosh. And guess what? I got a new student and he makes Johnny look like an angel. And I'm so glad I learned that, because now I have the tool set. I have the tools in my toolbox to address this new student in a positive way.
And that's awesome. You know, what I hear from you, I think over and over again, and we're obviously massive proponents of it, is training.
Yes.
Training, support, listening, training, feedback, training. If there was anything else to summarize before we move on, Mona, anything else that you want to bring to the table to let the audience know, what might it be? If not, we'll move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I first got in the industry and just running, you know, being the owner of 3 locations, you know, I wanted you to have 2 years of experience to come work for us, really, because I didn't have the time, or I didn't feel like we had the time to really invest. Now I realize that sometimes there's people that come in the field and you see their resume and it has nothing to do with childcare. And you're like, and you skip by that. Now I have a conversation. Why are you making this change? Well, the pandemic, just like it's taken other people from other industries, I realize my passion's always been kids. I want to see, well, let's have a conversation, and I'm more than willing to train them now. And I've had some good wins in that area. So even though you see the resume, you don't see this childcare experience, you think, oh, okay, you don't see that, don't discount them. Sometimes a quick phone call, 5-minute interview, and they might have the bones for an amazing teacher. It's just a matter of you taking the time to meet with them and helping to train and to get them where they want to go.
Yeah, you know what? You hit on something that's really important. It's part of our philosophy too. And that is, I'd much rather hire someone who is on the same page with our values and someone who could blend into our culture than just has experience, because we can train them to become a teacher. We can train them to get to a place where they're a wonderful person who can be caring and what have you, can be an educator, can be of those different degrees, having CDAs and all those kind of things. But at the end of the day, it's difficult to train someone to have the same values as you, in your school. So great time. Thank you so much, Mona.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful information. Thank you so much for participating.
Anytime. Thank you.
Awesome. And at this point, I'm going to look to bring on Jesse. So Jesse Bean, and Jesse comes to us again. He's the owner of Growing Hearts and Minds Childcare Centers. And he has, an accounting person with a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, which I think probably plays a big role in who you are, but also I think is absolutely wild and great is he's an accomplished not only speaker and presenter, but he's also doing some stand-up comedy. And I'm not exactly sure that's what we have you here today for, Jesse, but I do appreciate you coming on board. How are you?
We'll try to have some fun here today anyway, so I'm excited to be a part of it.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your schools. Did you come into this organically? Did you buy? How did you get started here?
Yeah, honestly, I'm relatively new as an owner. This spring I'll hit 4 years, but I purchased an existing school. Took it from about 40 kiddos to now we're at 88. And managed through a pandemic and really had to learn and grow through that process. So I'm excited to share some of what I have figured out.
Great. So as you heard us probably talking to Mona a little bit, what are some of the challenges that you've been up against the past few years? What are some of the things that you've seen that you're like, okay, I got to get my arms around this?
Sure. I mean, look, it's the same that everyone else is feeling out there. Staffing is tough. And, what we figured out this year as we looked more closely at our numbers was our 90-day retention rate was abysmal, was awful. Early part of this year, we were at a 50% rate. So half of the people that we hired made it 90 days. And there were still some that didn't make it much beyond 90 days, but literally 1 out of every 2 people who showed up on their first day of work made it to 3 months. So that was not working for us. The turnover wasn't good for the kids or for the families. And we were exhausted. Our kids were exhausted, and we had to figure out how to hire better, how to hire differently.
Yeah. It's interesting. In one of the recent presentations I had about retention, it stated that for the retention that you have in a school within your first year, the average in the childcare space is 44% turnover, which is huge. It's getting close to half of your staff turning over. They said that if you keep someone for 2 years, the chance of them turning over actually drops to 23%. And if you get them there for 3 years, the chance of them turning over is about 8%. So you can see how it fundamentally almost cuts in half every year, and it's getting them beyond that time. So with the different challenges that you started to see, Jesse, what did you start to do to implement to change the story, to change the game?
Yeah. So, look, we had to look internally, right? I know somebody just asked what we were finding out about that. And I think it starts with doing some self-evaluation. I had served in the Marine Corps a long time ago, and I remember studying their leadership principles and was surprised to learn that the first principle of Marine Corps leadership is not about toughness or dedication or, charging a hill or being strong. It's know yourself and seek self-improvement. So it's the idea that if you want to lead people and lead people well, you need to look at your process and what you're doing. And so when we really got into a hole staffing wise, that's what we did, right? We took a step back. And in my case, what I found out was I was so desperate to bring on new staff and new teachers that I was over promising what we would be able to deliver as a center. So for example, I might find a qualified teacher, a great candidate, really wanted to bring them on board, but they could only work a 7-to-4 schedule and weren't offering any flexibility around their hours. And so I would promise them that, great, we'll give you 7-to-4, no problem. And then they'd come into our school and we'd be in a situation where teachers were out sick and we'd need them to stay till 4:30. And, not even all the time, but just, periodically. And they were saying, nope, Jesse promised me, to be out at 4 every day, and they wouldn't be flexible and they'd end up quitting. So as I talked to, I'm the owner of the school, I've got a director and assistant director. So as a team, we had to come together and say, what is happening here, right? I had to hound the teachers who left, and I had to hound them because a lot of them ghosted us, right? After they walk away after 1 week or 2 months, whatever it is, they give us no notice and we never hear from them again. But I hounded them and tried to get feedback on what was causing them to leave, what wasn't working. And then we had to look at ourselves and say, okay, we have to make a shift in this process. And for us, we had a high rate of people who accepted offers when we gave them to them, and a high rate of people who showed up on the first day when we gave them offers, but a really low rate of people who stuck around. So what that told me was we have strong offers financially. We're giving them good pay. And, we figured out we needed a benefits package and we worked hard to implement that. But then, the way that we were communicating what the expectations were for our culture was not realistic for what we needed to expect from them, which was teamwork and cooperation and participating in the needs of the whole school. So just that piece, shifting it, really helped us keep people longer once they started.
So Jesse, let's dig into that a little bit. When you started looking at, you identified that setting expectations, the alignment of expectations to what the reality was, are going to be two different things. So yes, you're able to give them good financial package up front. You're able to offer them benefits up front, but then you probably, I'm assuming, had to back off of giving them the expectations, or at least being more realistic with the expectations. So how did you sort of span that chasm of what you would talk to them up front with what was going to be realistic while still attracting them?
Sure. I mean, look, it's a balance. I think for us, we just had to realize that bringing people on who don't stay 90 days is not helpful to us. It's counterproductive. And so, yes, it's true that right now if I have a candidate apply, and I don't have all these stats in front of me, but getting them from the initial application to the offer, there's fewer people that get offers with us. And we have a 3-step process that we have candidates go through. Just to name it real quick, I do an initial phone screen and interview with the candidates as the owner. Then the director of the school does a Zoom interview, a 45-minute more intense interview. And then step 3, we bring them into our school for a 4-hour working interview where they get a tour, they spend time in a couple of our different classrooms, they get to know our culture, and we basically won't give anybody offers until they complete all of those steps. And yes, there have been weeks, there have been months where we are frankly desperate for teachers, where we are short-staffed, and we've wanted to bring people on sooner, but we have figured out that going slower is better for us long-term. And we've had to hire substitute teachers, we've had to kind of fill the gaps. And we've had to, again, my other Marine Corps phrase, we improvise, adapt, we overcome. We just know that we have to slow down and think long-term for this to make sense. And again, I'll just say, even slowing down and getting through some difficult seasons where we were very tightly staffed, we have taken that 90-day turnover rate from March of this year, it was at 50%, and now we're at 81%. So wow. Literally now 4 out of every 5 teachers who start with us on day 1 make it at least 90 days. And that's been a game changer, and it's helped us, sustain growth in all of our classrooms.
So I love the idea of this. I know that there's people out there who are probably saying, Great idea, Jesse. I'd love to do that too, but we're just trying to grasp onto some air because we have to stay in ratio. If not, I'm gonna have to let families go. So there are oftentimes challenges when you've got what sounds like a great process, initial phone screen with yourself, then doing a Zoom call with the director, then a 4-hour working interview. Are you finding that any candidates are resisting that process? Do you communicate it up front, the expectations of the process? And what are you finding a bit as to sort of how you get people into that, where you're like, how do you onboard them into that process so you don't lose them along the way and go, geez, we invested all this time. And then at the end of the four hours, we're like, okay, we got to start over again.
Sure. No, I get that. And look, we do try to communicate that process up front. And during my initial phone screen, I let them know the steps in the interview process and kind of how far out we are from potentially bringing them on board, and certainly what their needs are with that. Good ones usually want to give their current employers 2 weeks notice. So we honor that and we don't push employees to start sooner because we expect that same professionalism from them. But look, Tony and everybody out there, I just want to say, I have been in those situations where we are desperate. I mean, look, it's embarrassing for me to admit that, like, in March of this year, following the worst wave of COVID that we experienced in our part of the country, they just, opened things up a little bit more, unmasking. But like, COVID was hitting us hard. Teachers were calling out sick. Then the ones that were staying were getting burnt out. Then they were leaving. It was a negative cycle, right? And I was very close to taking one of my classrooms and just permanently closing it down because we couldn't maintain the staffing, right? We did have to strategically look at some kids that we weren't able to sustain care for and have some difficult conversations to say, this is beyond our capacity. Some of our newest families, I had to approach personally and say, look, we took on more than we could handle here. We're not going to be able to continue to provide care for you. And it was difficult. And I hated it. And I believe we'll never have to do that again. But we had to take a step back. I mean, I was barely keeping my center open. And if I wanted to serve the other, 75 plus families in our care, I had to step back and shift the capacity that we could bring on until I got staffing under control. So look, whether it's increasing your tuition rates, reducing your current enrollment, we did what we had to do to stop the negative cycle of hiring where people kept leaving. And look, financially, I committed to it also. I know that the financial realities are difficult. I'm an accountant, but like, after the turnover we saw in March, we overhired. I lost money for several months to overhire people so that we could kind of stabilize the emotional burnout that teachers were feeling.
Yeah.
And that has built us to the point where today, we've got people that have been with us, a strong core that has been there over 3 months. And certainly even in my young tenure as a childcare center owner, we've been building that level of staff that's been there over a year now. And so, we're proud of that, but we were willing to make the difficult decisions to do what we had to do to turn things around.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate some of the things that you have gone through here, from the expectations through the process, through investment when times look tough, taking a small step back for a big step forward. In summary, before you were to move on in our conversation here today, is there anything else that you'd like to offer on this, Jesse?
I'll just reiterate that point, right? To know yourself, to seek self-improvement, to take a hard look in the mirror and to evaluate where you need to shift things, to be able to sustain your care long-term. Look, all of us in this business love kids, want to provide great care, emotional support in early childhood development. But to do that long term, we sometimes have to make hard choices. So, that would be my final encouragement. Ask yourself those hard questions and do whatever it takes to build that at your center.
I think it's super valuable what you're talking about. One of the areas oftentimes as owner operators, we're moving really quick. we all have egos. We all have this thing of, hey, we're the owner, we have to have the answer, you know? And at times that sometimes boxes us in to say if we're doing something that is messing up our own system, which is not accelerating our processes, that sometimes we're not willing to even look at ourselves as much. So I think you bringing this up, you know, taking it from a page out of the Marine Corps too, I think is really valuable. And by the way, thank you very much for your service to the country, because that's amazing too. So I'm very thankful for that, Jesse. And Jesse, thank you so much for joining us on today's panel. I'm going to ask you to do one thing though, if you go offline. Rebecca has asked some questions about some of the phone screening questions, and everybody can see those answers. If you don't mind answering that for her, some of them, we can capture those for her and the rest of the group.
Yeah, absolutely. Will do. And yeah, thank you, Tony, and everyone for joining.
Hey, thank you for joining us. Take care, Jesse. And I'd love to now have Kishia come on board with us here. Hi, Kishia, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Great, great. Let me go ahead and give you a little bit of an introduction. She's the owner of Kiddie Care Learning Academy, entrepreneur and owner of the largest private-owned childcare center in Southeast Alabama. Center has earned Quality Stars, voted one of the best daycare preschools of the Wiregrass in the last 6 years. That's awesome, by the way. And sits on the board of the Alabama Movement for Childcare. So you're definitely invested in this. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into this world of childcare.
So I am an Army brat. We moved around pretty much majority of my life. But this here is a Army post, Fort Rucker. And my dad was stationed here for a good majority of my life. My mom did in-home childcare because of us moving all the time. In 1996, she opened a childcare center when I was in college, and I absolutely had no choice in the matter.
Sometimes that happens with moms.
Right.
And dads, for that matter. But go
That's
ahead.
exactly right. But in 1998, I became a mom myself and struggled like you would not believe as a single parent. I moved away from my support system, and life just really beat me upside the head. So in 2000, I moved back to Alabama to work, help my mom in the daycare center. I went to school immediately to work on my master's, and messed around and fell in love with the kids, fell in love with what I did, and came to my mom with a plan based on the good and the bad experiences that I had as a single parent in the childcare sector, and the things I learned from my mom. So she invested in me. She refinanced the house, took the equity out, started the center in the city I live in is called Dothan, Alabama, and man, I was only supposed to be here like 6 months, and 22 years later.
22 years later, looking back at it.
Here we are.
Well, there you go. And I'm so happy to have you here today, because that's a culmination of a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge from a bright woman that we have here today. And with that said, what are the challenges that have been affecting you regarding your staffing over the past couple of years?
Everything that everyone else has said, that Jesse and Mona has said. So I'll say that to not go back over what they said, there's always a subculture in the workplace, right? There's the unofficial leaders that are in your childcare center. The ones who, when you have your staff meeting and, you say that, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And is there any question? And does anybody have any comments or input? And everybody sits there quietly. No one says anything. Mm-hmm. But then there's a meeting after the meeting. Yeah. So, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So, but what I realized also, because I think, as everyone else has alluded to, that you have to do some introspection of you and your center and your processes. So I realized that I was unconsciously contributing to that culture too, by pointing out the wrongs of my staff and my team members, and not always celebrating those wins. So sometimes you have to just kind of sit down and have those hard, honest conversations with yourself. So let
me ask you, when you say pointing out the wrongs instead of the wins, I think I can assume what you're saying, but can you give me an example?
They love bleach water out. they left the disinfectant out. Disinfectant has
Yeah.
to be kept under lock and key.
Absolutely.
And you left the disinfectant out and you didn't lock it up. And, you
So
know,
they got more stick than carrot, as they say.
right. Whereas, maybe they taught, a kid how to tie his shoes that day. Or, maybe there was some kind of breakthrough. Maybe there's a child who hasn't been speaking, now has said a word, or, we just comment on the things that they're doing wrong and not enough attention being on what is being done right or well.
Yeah. So
Because
catching
perfection
them
is not the right. Perfection is not the key here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. What are other things that you started to do to turn the tide with the way that to start creating more of a recruiting environment that was positive?
So one of the things I did is I started playing music in my
Oh.
center. I started opening when I knew that we had to change, everybody's kind of at their wits' end. At the morning, I changed to open the center. I had inspirational music playing.
Wow.
I had a simple diffusion. I know different states have different rules and some places might not allow this, but
Yeah.
in Alabama, we can have a diffuser. I have some little lavender, essential oils. So we got some yin and some good vibes going, and we just set the climate for the day.
Wow. So you were both having the environment, you changed the cultural environment that people were walking into. So there was music, there was actually scent. So you're not smelling diapers.
Right.
So what did that do in translation to how you started to be able to recruit better?
So before I get to that, the other thing I want to say specifically is that I believe that there's power in our words. And so, the staff will sit back and look at the new teacher coming in and be like, she's not gonna make it. They taking bets on how long they're gonna stay. And so I had to go around and personally speak to every staff member and say, look, I believe that there's power in our words. And so if you don't have anything good to say, I just ask that you not say anything. If you're not creating this welcoming environment for this person to walk into, we're kind of doomed from the start.
Well,
so I scheduled routine meetings. We did vision board trainings, vision boards, we went back to a whole connection. I feel like that was the piece, because I want you to have grace for me and what I'm going through, but I can't extend grace to my coworker, to my next teacher, for what she's going through. And so just by us having those moments together and celebrating each other wins, and then we found out that some of our staff members, our team members, were going through things battles we were unaware of.
Wow. So you mentioned something that some people may not be familiar with, the term a vision board. What is a vision board for you?
So a vision board, you can create goals, whether it be financial, whether it be educational, career goals, whatever that goal may be. So I bought this kit and everybody created one. And now let me tell you the flip side of that. Let me tell you, because we had some team members who really stepped up, but then we also had people who were playing small that had degrees, 4-year degrees in unrelated fields, who through that process, stepped up and stopped playing small and went and got positions in those fields.
Right.
That went back to school. So, that's not to say that everyone stayed, but the thing more than anything, I guess maybe that I hope to communicate, is that we created a culture of caring.
Love that. Love it. And so when you create the culture of caring, actually diving into a little deeper, Kishia, how are you able to really do that? How were you able to create that culture of caring?
So one of the things we did was we implemented core values. So the core values for our business are PDFT, professional, fun, dependable, teamwork. Part of being professional is not just for us and how we carry ourselves, but also in scheduling time for training. And we had to do that. So I close the center now. We take the minor holidays, like say Columbus Day.
Yep.
We closed and we did full day trainings, because the options were either having to come in on a Saturday to do training, we're having to come in after hours to get that training in. I started creating, so I have 2 locations. I'm in the process of opening my 3rd location. We started having, I call them masterminds every other month, and we meet between it. So if we're meeting in Dothan this month, where Center 1 is, we're going to do it in Enterprise next, in 2 months, where location 2 is.
Great.
And so that gave us all the opportunity to connect. So now my infant teachers can all be together, my preschool teachers, my toddler teachers, because sometimes we have a tendency to think, like Mona had alluded to, that, you know, you just have this one, I'm gonna call them bad. I use that term very loosely. I'm just using that for illustrative purpose, not because I believe children are bad. But you know, you have that one bad seed, that one bad child, and no, when you get to talking, everybody has that. That's not just.
Oh yeah. No, it's very true, but I want to get back to one of the things you said too earlier, Kishia, that sort of leads to that though on the staff side, and that is how you talk to all the different staff about coming in of, oh, she's not going to make it. Oh, I'm just waiting for the time. That is very super important. I'm a huge believer into one of the reasons people come and stay is because they feel like they belong. And quite often our teams have become, well, let's say cynical because of the turnover.
That's
and
right.
They're waiting for the turnover, that person to come in. So they're oftentimes not willing to invest in that person, get to know them. And in doing that, I think you experience this, is it actually comes across as bullying, where they're actually razzing the new person who's coming in, not giving her the support, not helping her out where they could help her out, just sort of letting her flail there. So when you have gone around, and let's say that you do find a staff member who might be really efficient, but you find that, like you mentioned before, sort of the leaders, the unspoken leaders in your staff meetings. But some of those people, if you find someone though who is not aligned with your culture, that's there, very effective, been around, teacher for a while, how do you deal with her in general, or him, but for a lot of times it's a her. So how do you work with a team member like that to help convert them over to, or if they're not going to convert, move on from them, you know? So what are your thoughts about that?
That's exactly what happened. Because if you think about your employees as your teachers, like if you gave them a letter grade, right? You have A, your A member, your B, your C, D, F. So we already know D and F, you want them out the door. Like, we're not even playing with them. But particularly that C level teacher, that you're either going to counsel them, you're either going to that they're either going to come up to that AB level, or they're going to drop down to that DF, and at either rate they're going to be gone. So and I'm gonna just say, a lot of times those are the people who are there every day, who have been there over 2-3 years. They've got some skin in the game. So trust me, believe me, I've been here. I know, insert your child care name.
Yeah. And so I think it's very powerful what you're doing with having those conversations. We are sort of coming to the end of our time. Do you have any other summary of the things that you may do that you'd love to share with the audience?
Unblocking communication. I was transparent with my team. A lot of times the message that they're getting right now is that we're getting these grants, we're getting this funding, we got PPP loans, you know, this money. They think that we're balling out of control out here. We're living high on a horse. Right. You know, it's so showing them, telling them, I paid them extra money. They got a 10% hazard pay when PPP funds were out. We started celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. If they had a family member that passed, we sent flowers, you know, little things like that to show that we care.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you'd love to offer here, Kishia? Because this has been all actually very powerful.
We started doing group job interviews.
Okay.
We started doing them after hours. We started doing them after hours, and like had dinner for them. And if you need to bring your kids with you, you can bring your kids with them. And then we kind of made it less threatening.
Yeah. And when you say less threatening, what does that mean?
Sometimes people get really nervous. Like I'm a person who identifies as a bad test taker. And sometimes people view interviewing as, you know, kind of that test. And So I made it just a very relaxed atmosphere, conversational. Like Jesse, we do the 3-step process too, but I'm not a part of that process initially because I was bottlenecking the process.
Yeah.
So I outsourced that.
Yeah, and I understand that too, because sometimes I've just had to get out of the way myself, or else I am the problem.
Right,
Trust me when I
right.
tell you, my staff has no problem in telling me that I'm the problem. They're actually pretty good at that. Well, Kishia, I want to thank you greatly for bringing your insights. Of course, I would love to have spent more time with all three of you. So, but we have come to the end of our time. So I'm going to move forward here a little bit. And Kishia, thank you so much. You know, one of the things I want to do is just review for everybody out there as we got an opportunity to hear from Mona, from Jesse, and from Kishia. You know, we heard from Mona really talking about always be hiring, setting up a great pool of staff members, and then training. She is in the classroom. She's doing a lot of observation. She moved away from the approach of really looking at and making assumptions about what people want and really understanding what they want. Jesse really looked at, you know, taking a book out of the Marine Corps and looked at, you know, self-evaluation and also looking internally yourself first to really look at, are there things that you can change within yourself? And then setting clear expectations and not setting false expectations while you're in the recruiting process, and then putting a very definitive process in place. And then just speaking with Kishia here, Kishia just gave us some great information too on, you know, looking at when, you know, are there influencers within your staff? Whether they be positive influence, are there negative influences? Are there people who could possibly be bullying your new recruits who are coming on because they just don't have a belief they're going to be staying with them? They're becoming a little cynical. So Kishia's talking to her team and really getting them on board to create ambassadors, for lack of a better term, with her staff as to people who are just going to be raising an eyebrow with them, and really looking at bringing her team members together so they can share different ideas, creating vision boards. Big thing that she mentioned too that you've heard through this, and I'm a big proponent of, and that is core values, is really establishing core values, you know, with when you're talking and you're having conversations overall. You know, it's a lot of these things I oftentimes think, you know, especially when I first got into the childcare game myself, you know, we're just trying to keep the wheels on the proverbial bus, and then we have to try to change some of them while it's screaming down the hill. I know that it's difficult. We know that it's all difficult, but as you can see from Mona, Jesse, and Kishia, we're all dealing with the same issues, but we do have to sometimes take our time. You know, is one of them had mentioned, is taking our time, evaluating. I think it was Jesse who said, you know, not hiring quickly, but really being thoughtful about it if you can do it. So I'd like to really infuse that with what you folks know. For those of you who don't know Inspire Care 360, we're very supportive of the talent side of the world. This is really what our game is. I come out of almost 30 years of talent training, development, HR services, benefits, all those things. So that's why we have really three pillars. We engage, we grow, and we optimize with our members. So we have onboarding training on our platform. We deliver content. We have professional growth. We have healthcare plans, HR support, but we also help people define their brand assessments, their digital marketing, their reputation, as well as having financial expertise to look at P&Ls, helping you get coached there, and also significant savings. So that really is about what IC360 does. And if you want to know more about us too, we're obviously there to help out. And this is how you would learn. I think Sarah will send a link out into the chat. We did have a couple great questions. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but you should all know that this is going to be on replay, and eventually this is going to be moved over to a podcast. So we are going to be sure to let you know when the replay is ready for this. You can not only get your CEU certificate, and you can also get this information. If you liked this event, please go ahead and look for our future events, but do not hesitate to suggest to us different topics or challenges you would love to conquer. And we would love to bring those to the table and have those discussions for you folks. So with that said, I'd like to say thank you very much for attending. My name is Tony DiAugustino, founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360. We're gracious that you've attended today. Hopefully this has added some value. I'd like to thank again personally Mona, Jesse, and Kishia for their time. But for all of you, have a wonderful remainder of your week. Thank you very much and have a great day. Take care now.